In 2013, Kat Bonner lost her mom in a tragic car accident. She figured out how to manage her grief and is helping other women do the same. On this podcast, you'll hear from other women who have lost their moms and discover the exact coping strategies you need to get through the day and be in the best place you've ever been. Don't miss another episode. Subscribe today. More information can be found at katbonner.com/podcast. And if you'd like to join a group of like-minded women, head to Facebook and search for the Life After Losing Mom community. Lastly, if you're looking for help managing your grief, book a complimentary connection call at katbonner.com.
So before we get started with the episode, I just want to share something with you. I'm sure you've heard multiple times that grief is an individual process. Well, the people you heard this from aren't wrong, because it very much so is. You're probably wondering, how can someone help me when they grieve differently than I do? That's why I'm so passionate about one-on-one coaching that is totally customized to you and your pain points. I let you guide me to ways I can help you. I can only take on 3 clients at a time, so the spots are limited. I'd love for you to tell me how I can help you in your grief journey. Welcome to the show, Bella.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I just like to start off every episode with each woman sharing what they want to about the loss of their mom.
Okay. Well, I'll start a little bit before the loss of my mom because it kind of all builds up to losing her. So I basically knew at a pretty young age that, my mom had issues, some mental illnesses, and she also struggled with an alcohol addiction off and on and an opiate addiction off and on. So from the age of probably, 5 or 6, I was kind of treated as an adult and knowing everything that was going on with her. I remember going to, the hospital multiple times at a young age, seeing her on holidays, and she had attempted suicide at that point. So, all of my life I was, kind of treated as a parent of my own parent. So leading up to it, she could be completely normal at times. She could be, my best friend at times. We'd have fun together. We sang, we danced, we did a lot of things together. She really believed in me, and basically, gave me my sense of self-worth. So even knowing all the issues she had, I still believed her, when she told me, like, you're worth it. You're smart, you're talented, you're pretty. But, when I was 16 years old, things kind of started really going downhill with her. I would come home from school some days and she would just be locked in her bedroom. Other days I'd come home and, she'd be outside, grilling hot dogs on the grill, wanting to hang out and have fun. But it was about a week after spring break. I came home. I was getting ready to go hang out with my boyfriend at the time. And I was getting ready, not a care in the world. I was 16 years old. I was going to go have some fun. And my younger brother, who was 13, about to be 14 at the time, came to me while I was getting ready and said, I think something's wrong with Mom. So I went in and I checked on her, and she was laying on her bed completely incapacitated. And at this point I was like, well, she took too many pills. She'll be fine. I'd seen it happen before. And I didn't really think anything of it. So I told my brother it would be fine. Just give it a little bit of time. So maybe 15, 20 minutes later, he comes back in. He's super upset. And he says to me, there's something really wrong. So I went back to her room, and at this point, it was pretty evident that something was very wrong. So I called 911. They got on the phone. They were like, "Can anybody do CPR?" And at the time, I was freaking out. And so my brother did it. It did not work. they got her out. They got a pulse back in the ambulance. And the next morning, I didn't go to the hospital because I really didn't want to see her that way. So I stayed with some relatives in a hotel that night that had came up from my dad's side of the family. And in the morning, I called my Nana, who was my mom's mom, and I asked what was going on. And they said they had taken her off life support at about 1:30 that morning, and that it wouldn't be long. So I asked my Nana if she could put the phone up to my mom so I could tell her goodbye. And I said, "I love you, Mom." And then about 10 seconds later, I heard it flatline. So part of me was like, she waited for me to say goodbye. And the other part of me was just completely destroyed. And so for about 6 months, everyone told me that it was an accidental overdose. Well, come to find out, one day I was talking with my Nana and she said, "Do you think your mom meant to do that?" And I was like, in my heart, I know she did. And she said, "Well, you're right. And you have a letter." So, I got my letter from my stepdad at the time, and it was like starting the grieving process all over again because I had convinced myself she didn't mean to do it. But she did. And in her letter, she made that very clear. So that's, a little bit about, what happened and how it happened. It's been tough.
Bless your heart. Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned, not like funny, but like, haha, ironic funny.
Yeah.
You're actually the first guest that I've had on the show whose mom died of like an overdose. Like it's been like, just natural causes or like cancer or something like that, which those still suck.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think society in general just does not take addiction seriously, and they don't think that it is a disease, and it very much so is. My mom was an alcoholic, so essentially addiction led to our mom's demise. But it's so interesting and it's hard, at least it was for me, and I'm assuming it would be for you too. It's like you can't blame them for getting addicted, but it's like their actions and their decisions led to their addiction. So it's like, okay, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Am I just like, speaking out loud, or do you feel the same way?
Oh, I definitely feel the same way. And too, my mom's dad committed suicide when she was 7 years old. So for me, it was like you knew how this would affect me or might affect me and my brother. And, you still took those steps to do the same thing, which has been very hard for me to get over because it's, it's something that I'd like to say now, I don't have kids, but if I did, that I would never do that to them. And there's been a lot of anger, but at the same time, it's like I understand as I get older, her struggles, her addiction, her mental illness, she could not help that. So.
No, yeah, I definitely could understand where you're coming from. I guess the way that I'm like thinking of it is like, okay, my mom didn't think that me and my brother were worthy enough to like basically be a parent to, so she decided to enroll as basically being a parent. Yeah. Once again, am I crazy, or like did that thought ever run through your mind?
It runs through my mind all the time. Because we depended on her. We had that mother-daughter relationship, but at the same time, it was so much more than that. I felt like, why couldn't you talk to me? Why couldn't you tell me this is how you were feeling? And then I look back and, she did, just without the words. And I was so young that it's, as I've grown up and grown older, I've realized I can't blame myself. And at the same time, as much as I don't want to blame her, that was her decision. And, that was her decisions that led her there. And so, at first, and, it's been a little over 9 years now, and it's taken me this long to figure out, I need help coping with this. It really did make me feel like I was not worthy of love from anybody. if your own mother can make a decision to leave your life permanently, then why am I deserving of any type of love?
Yeah, that's definitely a big thing I've noticed that comes with grief. And the first word that's going through my mind right now is blame. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I feel like when, you experience a loss this tragic and just grieving in general, the first thing you want to do is blame somebody. And it's like, okay, like you either blame the person that you've lost or you blame yourself. And then in all actuality, it's like, okay, like playing the blame game does what? Let's see, it probably does nothing, but it's like almost second nature. At least for me, it was in the beginning stages. And then it's like, okay, like I'm a firm believer in like actions speak louder than words. So yeah, like, your mom loved you, but her action by taking her own life, like basically it's like, you're not my mom anymore. Like you're not here to physically be my mom. So that action spoke louder than any word. That
exactly.
And I think people don't really realize how their actions are going to affect other people, and it sucks. But
yep. I so in her letter to me, she wrote it the day before she actually made the decision. I mean, she had made the decision then, but she wrote it the day before she had, actually committed suicide. And in it, she said, "Don't let this destroy you." And it's like, well, what else is it supposed to do? Like this isn't something this isn't a good thing. This isn't anything that's beneficial to me. I needed you. No matter what state of mind you're in, I needed you. So it was very confusing for me for a very long time, and still is, honestly, because, as a parent, that is your job, is to be there for your children. And, she wasn't, and she's not. So yeah, that's been very difficult for me, overcoming that feeling of like, okay, you think I'm strong enough for something like this to not destroy me?
It's like, I'm strong, but that's not the point. It's
like,
if you loved me enough, this wouldn't happen. So why? And it sucks too, because it's like, once again, we're quick to say that we weren't in her shoes. But at the end of the day, that's not like, and I don't have experience with suicide, so I can't say that, but like, I'm a firm believer in suicide's not the answer. Like, and I know how addiction works. I know that like, they don't think they have a problem, but addiction in itself is almost like, and forgive me if this is like wrong, but like, say for instance, so like, my mom was an alcoholic. She was drinking and driving, which led to her dying in a car accident. But like, and I'm not saying it is suicidal because she wasn't consciously like making the decision to wreck the car. But in a way, I think that addiction almost manipulates your brain to think that way. Like eventually addiction is going to take your own life.
Oh yeah. No matter if you mean to or not, addiction is, and there's such a stigma with it, that and suicide, that it's not talked about in a very beneficial way to anybody. Because people are ashamed of that. And then those left behind are ashamed of that as well. So it's just one of those things that you're never really going to get a handle on it if there's such a bad stigma with it. It's
the only way to get rid of the stigma, unfortunately, is to talk about it.
Yeah.
and
a lot of times those people don't want to do that. So
yeah, which, I mean, it's fine, I guess, to each their own. But yeah, how did you feel like, your value was affected a lot more in like your relationships with like your friends, like i.e. other women, because your mom was a woman, or was it just in general? I'm kind of curious about that.
So growing up, I was a super happy-go-lucky kid. I had lots of friends. But once that happened, my best friend at the time, she was the one I clung on to. And we ended up having a falling out, and that really, really hurt me. And I don't know if it was me or if it was her, or if it was both of us. But since then, I've found it extremely hard to connect to other women, especially. And I didn't really feel like anybody liked me because I felt like I had this stamp on my forehead that said I'm damaged.
God, preach it, girl.
Yeah, and it was just really hard to make friends or to open up to people, and then in my relationships, with men. At first, after it happened, I was that was where I wanted to find my value. And looking back now, it definitely was not the answer. But that was where I placed my value. It was like, if these men want me, then that makes me lovable. And it definitely wasn't healthy at the time, at all for me trying to cope with that. But it was the only thing I knew.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the American dream, right? Everybody's like, okay, like, let me just turn to a significant other or somebody that I'm attracted to and try to use them to fill that void. And it's like, even if you're the first one of your friend group that has like lost a mom, I feel like once you find, other women that have lost a mom, you find other women pretty quickly. Like, you learn pretty quickly after, the first one, hey, like, I'm not alone. But like,
yeah.
And this is why I say I can't help men, because I'm a firm believer that I literally can't, in the sense that, like, obviously their brains are completely hardwired different than theirs are. But I noticed, like, because I was 18, so we were very similar ages when we lost our moms, like, the teenage, I guess, adolescent years. I don't even know what they were described as. But yeah, like, going up and like growing through college and like, oh, like, you don't want to date a girl who's lost her mom. Like, I mean, I guess that's a whole other like topic, but yeah, like, first of all, we're hella worthy of being valued. So anybody who doesn't value you can fuck off because they're idiots.
Yeah.
And
agreed, 100%.
It's like, okay, yeah, you know that now, but like, you wish you would have known that X amount of years later, and it would have made, the last 9 years not hellish.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
That's how grief works. It's like, by the time when you reach that, like, pivotal moment, you're like, well, I guess better late than never.
Yeah, can't turn back time, It's definitely been a journey for me. And like you said, about finding other women, and, once you find one that, has lost their mom. And for me, I went without having what some would call a best friend. I always said I had acquaintances. I didn't have friends. I met my best friend. Her name's Chloe. She's awesome. She lost her mom at 16 as well, to an opiate overdose. So once I met her and we established that connection, there was no going back, and just having her there for me has made a huge difference in how I value myself and, my self-worth, because you know that you're not alone and that other people have felt what you're feeling.
Yeah, I was literally about to ask, like, how you kind of got over that hump and, like, realized, I am worthy. And it's like, as I talk to more people, I feel like some, like, things in grief are very much so, like, you have an epiphany and you're like, oh my God, this is how I'm going to heal from this specific struggle. And then other times it's a lot more gradual over time. And then you realize years later that you may have healed like a long time ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. For me, for so long, I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I just ignored all of the feelings that I felt. I just pushed them aside and was like, you just got to get through your day. Just go to work, go to sleep, do it all again tomorrow. There's, you just got to do what you got to do. And until honestly, it was probably when I met her, about 2.5 years ago now, that things really started looking up for me, because I did not feel so alone. I felt like this person has been through something so similar as me, and she's lovable, she's worthy. So why would I feel like I'm not?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Obviously, the whole like process of grief honestly fascinates me, but it's so like weird how you're like, just feeling comforted, not like by somebody actually comforting you, but like literally having a woman in her life that has lost her mom. I'm like, not just like via like social media, like that's great, but like actually physically having that person in your life, you're like, holy shit. Like, you know, like,
Yeah.
you get through this together, and it just is literally like, yeah. And sometimes people get that, I think, too late. And it's also important too to find somebody who's open about it, because other people, like, you know, I know women who've lost a mom and they don't ever talk about it. And that wasn't really helpful for me. Like, I know it's going to sound really selfish, but I mean, if it takes like two people to tango, you know, like,
Yeah.
is your friend like that? Like, can you attest to that? Or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, I've always been a very open person in general. I'm super emotional, and I let myself feel the things now that I'm feeling in the moment. But for a while, it was something that I just ignored. You know, and I really didn't meet anybody who had been through what I had been through for a very long time. So I really did feel like, you know, you just don't talk about it. It makes people uncomfortable. But at the same time, you know, who cares if you make people uncomfortable, because we're the only ones that are living in our reality and our life. And, you know, you've got to do what you need to do for yourself to heal. So.
LOL. I literally love you. I had someone tell me once, I think I was in high school still. I lost my mom, so like 2 months before I graduated high school. So most of the people, like, basically, you know, act like they're there for you, and then they're not. And I remember this one girl, we were like best friends throughout high school, and then we like stopped talking, and she told me one day, she was like, you know, being around you when you get really sad or really emotional makes me uncomfortable. And I'm like, you're
supposed to be my friend.
Oh my God. Like, I literally don't have anything to say to that. And I think now she probably realized, hey, I kind of fucked up. Well, yeah, no shit, you fucked up. But like, and I know, like, but you were just bringing that up, and you were like making people uncomfortable that like you've been through a lot. And I'm like, you know what? Think about how uncomfortable I am.
Exactly.
Like, you think this is hard for you? You think this is hard for you? Let's back up. Yeah, I could go on a tangent all day. That's so funny. So were there like, you know, once you got to the realization, hey, like, I am valued, like, by myself and by other people, were there any huge changes that like you saw in your life, or anything that was like more positive and different?
So yes, for a while, you know, I was an athlete. I loved to write poetry. I loved to sing. And then, you know, once mom passed, it was just like all of those things just slowly, I stopped. And because I felt like I wasn't good at it, I felt like no one wanted to hear me sing. No one wanted to read my poetry, you know, blah, blah, blah. But it took, honestly, I want to be real upfront and honest here. I had a complete mental breakdown, a depressive episode type of thing a few months ago. And it really took that to get me to realize, you know, you've got to help yourself. And the best thing for me has been therapy. It's something that I put off for far too long. You know, I did it here and there after mom passed, but I wasn't ready, I guess, at that point. I wasn't ready to be unapologetically honest with myself, and especially with anybody else, until that happened to me. And my boyfriend actually was like, Bella, I love you. I want to be with you, but I'm worried about you, and you have got to do something. So at that point, you know, the next day I started calling people. I started calling psychologists. I started, you know, really digging deep into myself and saying things have got to change. And so now I've started working out, which is something I did not do for years upon years upon years. And it feels great, like just getting myself going, getting myself moving again. And it's such a sense of accomplishment, after I run my mile and after I, drop my mile time in half. It's awesome. I'm still working on, the writing part, just little posts on Facebook here and there, just getting things off of my chest and, out of my mind. And it feels great to just be open. And one of the things I've always wanted to do is I've always been a person who goes out of my way for people who probably don't deserve it. And I think a lot of that comes from what I went through with my mom. I want to help people, and sometimes people that don't deserve it, but, so for me, being able to tell my story and be open and be honest about it has been one of the best healing, processes for me. And it may not be like that for everybody, but I'm no longer ashamed of what I went through. I'm no longer ashamed of the choices that I made, a few years ago, and even up until recently, that weren't necessarily good, but it's got to be talked about. It's got to be out there because someone needs to hear it. So,
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I definitely think that everybody needs to talk about it. Everybody needs to share their story. It might take some people longer to realize that than others, but honest to God, the only way that you are going to heal is like sharing your story. And this sounds really crazy, but I posted in like some of the Facebook groups, like, hey, if anyone wants to share their story on a podcast, let me know. And I literally had, it was another group that I'm in. I like posted the same thing and somebody commented back. They were like, why would we want to talk about all the shit that we've been through? And it just broke my heart to realize that like there are women out there who think that sharing their story won't help other people, but they're so wrong because it will.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's why like creating space is so important. Like, I mean, yeah, people can share their story on the Facebook groups, which is great. Like, I'm not discouraging that at all, but there's something about like saying it, like even if you say it out loud to the wall, even if you tell your freaking cat, like, whatever, there's literally something, and I can't describe it, but like actually like physically sharing your story out loud rather than typing it on paper. It's like, and then you find that one person and they're like, wow, you telling me your story changed my life. Like when you get that, like it makes all the shit that you've been through worth it because, it's like, you can make a difference in one person's life. Like they literally might not ever have. And that's what I said, like, to the reply. I was like, like, I provide this, like, space where people can share their story and help other people. Like, think about it. This group has 400 members, which is a great amount. But think about how many people or how many women there are out there in this world who could be listening to this podcast or who could be literally looking for something specific that might not be in that Facebook group.
Exactly.
Like you sharing your story in the Facebook group is not a problem, but like when you have a platform that can reach millions and millions of people, it's like, oh my God, like I didn't know, like I knew I was not alone, but when I started this, everyone's like, oh, like your niche is too specific, like women who've lost a mom. Like I did not realize because I was debating between women who've just lost a mom and women that have lost a parent because I do think, that I can also help women that have lost a parent, but I was like, that's just where my heart is. It's just women losing a mom because I can 100% attest to that. But I was like, holy shit, there's a lot of people out there that have lost a mom. Like
so many people.
It's literally crazy. Like, I don't know how to wrap my mind about it. And when you hear so many like stories from other people, like I hear your story and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm automatically like, I love you. Like, I just want to hug you. Like you're my sister, And I know it sounds super cheesy and cliche, but like, once again, I'm asking you, hey, do you feel that way? But yeah, like, what are your thoughts?
I do feel that way. I mean, like I said before, when you're going through something and you feel so alone, you're really just looking for someone to understand you. And it's really hard when you feel like nobody does and nobody can. And and so, I'm in a lot of support groups on Facebook, whether it be motherless daughters, whether it be, survivors of suicide loss. I'm in a lot of those groups and I read these people's stories and they feel the same way that we do. They just want to have someone understand them. They want companionship. They want to know that they're not alone. And the only way that people are going to know that they're not alone is if people talk about those things. If people reach out, if it's a hard thing to talk about. Of course, you don't just want to be like, "Hey, I lost my mom," let's talk about it. But when you feel like you're in a sisterhood of women that have gone through the same thing, because losing a mother, and especially at a younger age, at a pivotal age, like we were, that you just feel so lost. You feel like, no one's going to understand you because you have all these complex feelings. And you can't just let that sit in your brain. You can't just let it eat you up alive, or else, you're not going to be the person that you're supposed to be.
Yeah, no, you're very right. I mean, if you think about it, like, average person, like, I know people who are my age who has every set of grandparents still alive. And I'm like, holy balls, like, holy shit, that, like, literally completely blows my mind. So, and I mean, I'm not saying I love to talk about death, but, like, death is a part of life. And I think, too, like, when you realize that, you find these group of people, like, I never really understood, I guess, the importance of, like, the support groups, because I realized very quickly, like, I found those people in my life that I could relate to. So I was like, oh, like, why don't these people just, go talk to someone they can relate to? But I guess it's like, it's always, once you think about it, it's always nice to have different opinions, which is why you have all these people. Like, I noticed a lot of times when I needed something, I would go to the same person, and that wasn't bad. But now looking back on it, it's like, wow, I wish I had gone to, like, other women that also lost their mom, so I could have talked to them about how they handled this, rather than, I mean, any guidance is better than none, I guess.
Yeah, but it's always good to have, you want to see other people's stories because people deal with things so differently, like my brother, for instance, he was super close to my mom, and I look up to him, even though he's my younger brother. I didn't go to college. My mom pushed college on me, and after she passed, I was like, I can't go to college. But my brother, he is going to college. He's going to graduate in December. He's so smart and so just resilient, but he will not open up to anybody. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I wonder, what is this poor kid going through? What is he feeling? We're total opposites, so it breaks
Girl,
my
he's
heart.
a man.
Yeah, he is a man. He is.
It's sad.
He ain't no different from the others.
My brother was the same way. Like, I found out from my mom's sister. She's like, oh yeah, like, did you know your brother went to therapy? I guess he went to therapy like once. But I think men get very, very angry, or they just suppress their grief. And here I am, making assumptions. But just from what I know about men, I'm like, okay, I can help people who, suppress grief, but I think women are also just a little bit more, like, realistic and, like, rational sometimes. And men are just like, I
agree with that.
No, I'm not talking about it at all. And I'm like, all right, dude, if you're not going to talk about it, like, I throw my hands up. Like,
yeah, like, there's nothing more I can do. Like, you let me know when you're ready.
Keenan, stop. Sorry, my dog's pissing me off. Yeah, no, that's exactly why, like, and I'm not saying all men are like that, but yeah, that's a whole new, I think that's why I struggled so much with, like, finding, like, men in my life who could date someone without a mom, because they're like, what the heck? And that's, a whole topic for another day. But it's just, like, the world needs to break the stigma. Like, the world needs to talk about death, and it needs to talk about grief, because how is it ever going to get better? Like, literally, people, like, this sounds bad, but people die from losing people. Like,
yeah,
because they don't
die of
talk about it.
heartbreak, and
And they're like, oh my God, this person died, my life is over. And I'm like, well, it's because you acted like death didn't exist. Like, it's honestly really crazy. It blows my mind. And I think about it too. Like, I don't know. I try not to make assumptions, but I noticed a lot of times, and I don't know, maybe there's just so many things that, you know, you need to find in yourself, because at the end of the day, you are your biggest ally. You only have yourself. Like, when you realize, hey, I am worth it. Like, I am worth this. And then, like, you're like, you know, I need to get my shit together. I need to put myself first. I need to focus on myself. And it pissed me off when people are like, oh, you're being selfish. I'm like, first of all, you can go out whatever you want, but all you have is yourself. So fucking take care of yourself, for God's sakes. Like, that's not bad. It's, yeah.
It took me a long time to realize that, you know, from, you know, all the issues my mom had, I had to think about her. You know, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking everything I did was to please her. Everything I did was to get her approval. Everything I did was to take care of her. So it was a struggle for me to feel like, hey, I deserve to be taken care of. You know, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to look out for myself. I deserve to do the things that I want to do, because like you said, like, this is and I deserve to be a little selfish sometimes, because when it comes down to it, as you said, all you've got is yourself. You know, you can have relationships with people, but that's not guaranteed. You know, they can leave you at any moment, but you're always going to be with yourself.
Yeah.
And so
it's
you do
not
have
sustainable.
to take care of yourself.
You're never going to leave yourself. And I think, like, once, like, it takes a really long time to reach that point. And, like, not just in grief, but in life in general. And then you throw grief on top of it and you're like, oh, well, there's a double whammy. But
yeah,
once you reach that point in your grief, like, literally, that is the game changer. Like, I deserve to be happy. And I always say in life, everything is a decision. So it's like, okay, like, you are worthy. So you choose to make decisions that make you feel worthy. Like, you know, like, if you want to be happy, then you need to choose to make decisions that will lead to your happiness. And then eventually it just becomes part of your lifestyle, and you don't have to, like, choose anymore. Don't get me wrong, you know, you'll have your days, but I think that's where, like, self-reflection and just, like, consciousness comes in, you know. And it's not easy. People don't want to think about it. But did that happen for you?
It did. You know, like I said, it took like a literal mental breakdown after just holding everything in for me to say, you know what, like, I have to stop being ashamed of these feelings that I feel. I have to stop being ashamed of decisions I've made. I have to stop being ashamed of how I feel about myself. You know, I used to love myself, and when Mom left me, it made me question everything. And so, you know, I was recently diagnosed bipolar, and this came after, you know, my mental breakdown. And I was super ashamed of that because my mom was bipolar. And the last thing I wanted in my life was to hear, hey, so are you. But I'm so, so, so proud of myself for finally putting my needs first and saying, you know what, I do have these issues and I do need to take care of it if I want to live the life that, you know, I deserve. And everyone deserves happiness. And it's hard when you go through something like we've been through to value yourself when, you know, you feel like your own mom didn't even value you to a degree. So yeah, it's definitely,
it's a very tricky thing to manage and to understand. And there's some things, you know, you just won't understand. But like, especially after this conversation, if there's one thing I realized, like, don't be ashamed of anything. Like, you're enough. Like, you are more than enough. Like, there's no, and I think it's just because society is so quick to give grief negative stigmas. But like, one of my friends told me a quote once: grief is the price that we pay for love. And when I think about it, it is so true. It's like, you would rather have your mom, but like, you loved your mom so much, regardless of any decision anybody makes. And I think too, like, literally any decision that I made, like 4 years of being in college after losing my mom, just completely ignore them, because they were probably the worst decisions I've ever made in my life.
Girl, yes, I feel you on that.
But yeah, people are just some people can't handle that, which, is fine. But yeah, like, you loved your mom so much that you are grieving her, and not very many people in the world get to say that. And that's something to be proud of. Like, fuck yeah, me and my mom had this good of a relationship. Like, it hurts so much when she's gone, but it's like I have the best mom ever, like.
Yeah. Even with all her issues, I felt that way. It was like,
that's what's
I
important.
saw her dark side. Yeah.
I mean, it's literally like, I'm going to love you through it, like through thick and thin, no matter what, because actions and decisions don't make people the people that they are. You need to look like their heart. And that's what's important. So I think that's a really great place to close. And on a happy note, right? I always try to do that.
Love it.
Is there anything else that you want to leave with the listeners about your story, just about grief or mother loss in general?
It feels like a downward spiral. It feels like you're just, I use this analogy a lot, and I've used it a lot at times when I just feel completely lost. I feel like I'm drowning, and I'm in the ocean, and there are boats going by, and people are just looking at me wondering, what is she doing? And no one will throw me a lifesaver. But at the end of the day, you're the only one that you can depend on to save yourself. You are literally the only one, and you are worth it. You are worth everything in this world. And it may feel like you're not after, losing someone so special to you, like your mother, but your mom would not, anybody listening that's lost a mom in any type of way, your mom would not want you to look at yourself like a burden. Your mom would not want you to look at yourself like you're unworthy, because you are. She brought you into this world, and she loved you. So remember that, remember that.
Oh my God, I love that. Yep. Okay. I'm just going to let that sit and resonate. I'm ready for a little bit. Yeah, well, oh my God, I am so thankful for you and your vulnerability. I know it's not easy to come up here and share your story, but it resonated with me, and I know it's going to resonate with so many people. So I thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Good.
I feel like a weight lifted off my shoulders even more.
Yes, that's what I love. People sharing their story, and like, yes, you get to help people and you get to help yourself. Hey friend, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before you go, I have 4 favors to ask you. First, I wanted to let you know that I host a group for women where we share our day-to-day stories, challenges, and victories. If you want to come along for the ride, head to Facebook and search for the Life After Losing Mom community. Second, if you don't mind leaving me a review and telling me how I've helped you in your grief journey, I would greatly appreciate it. Third, head to katbonner.com/podcast to access previous episodes and subscribe for episodes in the future. Finally, head to katbonner.com to schedule a complimentary connection call with me. I'd love to know more about your grief journey. Always remember that despite losing our mothers, we have flourishing futures.
This has been an OutsourceYourPodcast.com production.